Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join in. I'm going to talk about automation and AI, source to payables. So what is artificial intelligence? What is Gen AI? And I'm expecting the vast majority of people already understand this, right? So I just want to level set a little bit. So it's kind of this wide area called artificial intelligence. So things that replicate the function of humans, right? In terms of problem solving and decision making. So what is generative AI? I mean, I don't know about you, but there are two places I go for an answer of anything, right? One of them is my wife, who's very wise, and the second one is ChatGPT, right? So when I asked, what is generative AI for ChatGPT, it's a great way of describing, it's an AI that uses neural networks to generate human-like content, including text and music, that learns from existing data, often generating new, indistinguishable content. Right? And the interesting thing is, to what extent is the text generated by generative AI part of the future world, right? Again, we don't have to solve that today. We're going to get very specific and talk about how this applies to source to pay. But I've got a kind of another slightly different model, right? So this is kind of how I think of it, yeah? So, and this is very much my point of view. So generative AI is firstly, it's a large language model, and it's generative. And the next thing is it's contextual, right? So if you've used ChatGPT, you'll see on the left-hand side, you have a series of conversations, and then within a particular conversation, it's best to have a particular theme. So let's say you want to talk about start to interrogate about the life and work of Beethoven, right? By staying within that particular chat, ChatGPT is learning within the chat, and that contextual becomes more and more powerful. So when I'm using ChatGPT, I'm always looking for relevant topics and themes to use it with. Right? It's just contextual. And actually, that information doesn't get learned and reused, right? We can spend a while talking about learning and reusing, or whether you use that through OpenAI, or whether you use it through AWS or Azure, right? Which is probably for later, something in terms of security. And the third thing is, it's multimodal and multilingual. So it is not just text. It is also video. It's also images, and it's multilingual. A brilliant way to translate something when you finish something is by asking ChatGPT to translate it. So that's what it is, right? It also it has a massive amount of data and compute power. Yeah. So the amount of data and compute that the big players like Amazon, Microsoft, OpenAI are throwing at this, Anthropic are throwing at this is huge. So, and it has to be. And it becomes really interesting then. And we're obviously using it for everything, including, gym planning. But over time, I think the use cases that generative AI is applied to will start to reduce. And we're only going to use it where it really solves the problem. Because for now, what's happening for these companies is a loss leader around the amount of compute and data required for some relatively simple tasks. Again, that's not for now, but it's just something to reflect on. It's an expert. It's expert generating. It's not an expert opinion. Yeah, it provides its best guess, not an expert. You have to think about it, and it's not client or process specific. Now, the way that the things are evolving, when this is kind of sort of several months ago, the way these businesses are running, whether it be with a sort of big hyperscalers or with OpenAI through the new enterprise version, actually is you can have a general language tool, and you can start to incorporate your own company-specific information and process tools. And the combination of those things can be really powerful when you start to apply it to business process. The final thing is it's not always explainable, and it can somehow generate hallucinations, right? So I think that these are interesting contexts with which to think about how you can use it. And I think, by the way, my opinion is simply genius and will start to change the way we function and operate, particularly the way it connects and integrates into our business and our systems. So that's what it is. What I want to do now is start to zoom into, and then where does it apply in kind of our home turf in terms of source to pay, right? So I wrote an article in May 2023, earlier in the year. But in this article, I've sort of put a table together that sort of sets out what some of the characteristics are. This is kind of my point of view. So that kind of, we've got these three kind of, let's talk about the top three lines first, right? Knowledge-based, analysis-based, conversation-based first. And again, we'll sort of come back to it when I've explained the table. right? So is it something that requires high levels of knowledge? Category management is a perfect example, right? So the category managers tend to be rock stars who understand real detail about what happens in the category, who to buy from, items, seasonality. You all the way through to accounts payable. Actually, not an awful lot of knowledge required. It's very structured, right? But all the information tends to be in the transaction itself. Is it analysis based, right? To what extent do you want to understand what's happening? And I think supply management is a great example, right? Because you actually not only need to understand what's happening your side, you need to understand what's happening supply side, and in multiple tiers of the supply chain. And then is it conversation based? To what extent is there a need to be able to actually have a conversation to understand what I want to buy, whether I bought it, what's happening in terms of lead time? They're, for me, three real characteristics about whether and how you can apply generative AI or AI more broadly. And I'll come back to sort of touch on some of these things. And then confidentiality, right? This was a really big topic. It was only until, I think, March 23, when OpenAI actually stopped taking information put into chats and incorporating it in its learning models. I mean, to be fair to them, they were kind of learning, they were creating an industry and understanding how to do it. But that should I incorporate company-sensitive, supplier-sensitive information into my conversations is really, really important, right? It's fun. And the article talks about, what should a CPO do? How should we put some guardrails around that? How can we make sure we've got protection? What should the policies look like? Right, I'm not going to go through all that because it's available through the link. But it's really important. That said, the latest enterprise version of ChatGPT and the sort of, hyperscaler versions, whether it be Azure or AWS, handle a lot of that, right? So look at the article, understand that, and then make sure you work with IT and safety and security to understand it, make sure people are using it validly, because then it's really, really powerful. Right? So when it comes to, just pick something like sourcing, right? The ability to be able to receive all your RFP responses, analyze them by posting them into a tool like ChatGPT and have it call out the differences is incredibly powerful, right? The ability to be able to, in areas like operational procurement or accounts payable, where you've got large volume of queries and differences, have a conversational tool is incredibly powerful. And indeed, they're kind of, and actually the very bottom line here, the generative AI fit to talk about accounts payable in particular actually is not that high in some ways, because actually the conventional tools of machine learning and deep learning are incredibly powerful. So what this sort of talks about is for each of these areas, there is a valid reason why these technologies are relevant. Now, the question then is, well, how and where do I apply them? Again, it's subject to kind of some of my other work, but I spent some time thinking about what are the areas across your source to pay or across your business that are really critical, really genuinely business critical. Where does the business strategy flow down into the procurement strategy that says these are the 5 things we need to solve? What are our moments that matter? Something around, supply, commodity pricing, right? And understanding what inflation implications there are. Something about supply risk, something about delivering on compliance, right? The 4 or 5 or 6 things, the moments that matter, that really make a difference to your business. You should really double down and focus on the AI there. And then the rest of the areas, your sort of business colleagues should be allowed to go and take advantage of whatever tools can be used in each of the areas, right? So if you pick up the article, you'll be able to see there's quite a lot of opportunity all the way across the piece. I guess the other thing to say from an AI perspective is not only are there vast amounts of use cases you can actually apply generative AI and essentially build your own tool, there are also a tremendous number of applications now that solve each of these use cases, right? So the best of everything scenario happens where you've got technologies. Sassify, for example, is one example of a tool, one of the 20 tools that allow you to improve the cost of your cost and performance of your SaaS estate. So AI is beginning to appear through the core applications like SAP or Oracle. It's appearing through then sort of best of everything applications, and the ProcureTech yearbook is about to be launched. I really recommend going to the search on Google for ProcureTech, run by a guy called Lance Younger, who's really spent some time thinking about what are the top 100 technologies of the world. And it's also been applied through generative AI, and the opportunities are quite material. But what I would kind of want to talk about is actually there is low-hanging fruit for AI in accounts payable, because in some ways it's kind of slightly strange that, here we are in 2023, we've got an incredible amount of computing power, but yet we still can't actually raise orders, receive invoices, manage receipts, and have those things matched without, small armies of people still talking to lots of customers and clients who've still got really big functions within the account payable itself. But before we get to that, I want to try and present you with another model about how to think about Gen AI. So when you're thinking about, how can I use it in my business? What are some of the use cases? And then what are some of the sort of contexts in which we're going to apply it, right? So how do I apply it, right? So the 4 C's around use cases are content, conversation, collaboration, and code. So try and remember those 4 C's: content, conversation, collaboration, and code. So content, connecting, collating, analyzing text and image content is massively powerful, particularly in procurement, where we've got huge amounts of third-party external data, supply risk information, RFP pricing, historic spend information. It's really powerful in sort of making sense of content. And it's a really strong area for all of us, right? We should be thinking about how can we use it. Again, within the bounds of the aspects of code and confidentiality I've talked about, safeguarding and security through policy. Second one, conversation, right? So, we've all had the sort of really poor help desk experience, but actually just chatting to GPT or other tools, we're now in a position to be able to drive, much more sophisticated conversational agents. And indeed, the way that those are delivered now by the likes of AWS or Azure, they're delivered through kind of no-code code benches that allow you to be able to sort of, people in the business build those things, right? It's no longer a complicated thing to do. Collaboration, right? Inspiring group problem solving, so bringing people together to be able to solve a problem, whether it be in terms of developing a strategy or in terms of sort of solving a supply problem. And the final one being code, writing, testing, documenting, and debugging code, right? And that might feel some way away for folk in sourcing and procurement and payable, but actually the power of that to be able to be used by our colleagues in IT really effectively help us is really super powerful, right? So I went to an AI dinner in February, and there were people already there, February 23, people already there, writing the first 90% of their code using ChatGPT and then just testing it, debugging it, and working out whether it's sort of scalable and secure. Yeah. So content, conversation, collaboration, code, and then kind of how you're going to use it, right? So, and I think this is hopefully quite powerful, right? Is it for the business? Is it with the business? Or is it in the business, right? So for the business is actually someone, and this might even just be their own version. I'm not endorsing that, but it doesn't necessarily need to be secure. They're not ingesting, they're just sort of saying, what does a good category strategy look like for facilities? For an organization with a UK-based organization, right? Well, I'm sure we use that all the time. I use that for a lot of my kind of one-on-ones, right? So that's for the business, without ingestion, just being used for day-to-day. The second one then, with the business, right? Then, so, you're storing customer and supply confidential information into a tool like GPT. And I'm using GPT, by the way, generically, into your generative AI tool. Then you're using and analyzing them. So you're absolutely certain you follow all the policies and security and everything else, right? You're really clear about the fact that all that information is not getting reused. But both those two things are really using the sort of kind of enhancing human decision-making, back to where I started in terms of enhancing. But the human is absolutely making the choice. In the business then, and this is where I kind of, when I went to IBM in 2017, I thought we'd get to really quickly, and we didn't, it's then you being used as an AI agent to augment transactions, to be able to, have conversations, be able to manually automate the posting process. And this is when it becomes really powerful. And at that point, it becomes an AI agent, a digital worker within your kind of ecosystem. So just again, just in terms of, I'm then going to sort of start to zoom in a little bit more. So some possible accounts payable AI use cases. So firstly looking at content then. So if you are extracting invoice line item, so actually extracting the complete process of extracting information. So the OCR piece is relatively easy, but then turning that, what you receive from OCR, into meaningful information, fixing the OCR shortfalls, and then matching it to line items on headers and line items on purchase orders is kind of the holy grail. Auto coding of invoices. If you're in a position where you can allow you to recognize something, and then you're in a position to be able to go back and say, I need to fix my master data. So, you know, how can you then say, here's a difference between these two items? Does it mean my master data is wrong? Could be a correction of the posting, or it could be master data. You're going to start to see through that the virtuous circle of improvement of master data quality. Master data quality is the #1 barrier for the next any transformation program. We've been grappling with master data challenges for the 25 years I've been in consulting. Next one then, auto-coding invoices. So particularly no PO invoices. At the start of my career, with people, SAP customers had kind of $50 million posted to one-time vendor, right? It was terrible. The world was terrible. But since then, procurement has brought that under control. One-time vendors been got rid of, but we still have this no PO invoices, some of which are legitimate and some of which are not. And by coding them consistently, by recognizing the category to a consistent fashion, to a consistent place, you can start to understand that and decide whether it's non-compliant, eliminate those suppliers and start to manage it. Right? And again, all that happens seamlessly without any involvement from accounts payable. Right? Extracting statement information, reconciling statements to balances, identifying different items and then auto-posting, either requesting copies of invoices or correcting duplications. These are all use cases that have been running for, 6, 8, 10 years. And are kind of, sort of are kind of almost mainstream. Identify master data errors. I think this is the holy grail, right? So for me, the challenge has always been, we've got so many different master data versions. In some ways, it's almost seems strange. If I'm a customer and you're a supplier, we independently and separately manage our own versions of master data. But, over time, through acquisition and through lack of discipline and lack of governance, master data errors have sort of grown. There's definitely an opportunity here to sort of solve that problem. Yeah. Then just some of the easy stuff, right? Accounts payable procedural documentation or procurement operations procedural documentation, making sure they're up to date, including all the exceptions. It's translated into all the local languages. It contains all our supplier information. All those things are ways that can really improve the experience of the supplier and or the sort of request for approval, right? Making the not only the accounts payable process completely automated, but making the experience around it exceptionally critical. Next one being then identify patterns from tickets. Yeah. So when you've got tickets through your ServiceNow or whatever, or Remedy or whatever the tool is it used for service management, or whatever's happening in terms of your conversation, where things are falling out of the conversation, you can understand those problems, identify the root cause, maybe solve the root cause if the root cause is a business process topic, or if not, improve the quality of the chatbot. All these things increasingly change the quality of the process and also changing quality of the conversation. And then kind of one-liner and analytics and reporting. So AI can be used in a tremendous number of different ways to allow you to understand what's happening and then report on performance, but also then to take into action, right? Recommend actions or even automate actions, right? So this is and that's around the sort of the content stream, right? So that's what's available. And then conversation. Again, I think the accounts payable team have got a pretty thankless task in some ways. I mean, no disrespect. They have someone over here who is a category manager who defines the strategy, someone over here who is the requester that then buys it or purchasing that buys the thing. You've got a supplier then who maybe has a conversation about what they need, and then the requester or someone else is supposed to receive it, and then all that is passed to accounts payable to solve. Yeah. So, and actually they're very rarely in a position, AP are very rarely in a position to be able to actually intervene and have to go back to lots of people and try and say, how do I solve it? Right? There's no need for that to be the way, right? So all of those requests for an approved conversations should be done through a conversational tool. And then you've got some sort of documentary evidence. You understand what you've said, what the supplier said. So you've got a sort of a Sarbanes-Oxley audit trail in terms of what's happening, as well as having a much better experience for everyone and kind of seamless interaction in accounts payable. The kind of, where is my, the last sort of, to 10 years or so, we're building vendor management portals saying, where is my, the number of calls that come into payable still saying, when am I going to get paid? There's no need for that. So if you like the tactical responses, it can also be used for sort of something more strategic, right? So we know data management changes or actually ISO certification changes, or questions around things like strategic things like vendor tooling. You can use it much more proactively to be able to generate what you need to be able to support the sort of category manager. And I guess then if we extend this accounts payable into operations as well, then there's an obvious use case around guided buying assistant, the one I kind of started with. So all these are definitely strong opportunities for accounts payable AI use cases. Okay, so let me just then and again, these are kind of Basware examples because they're very specific. Again, it's a company that I kind of work for, but I mean, it does absolutely perplex me. I did my first SAP implementation last century, right? In 1999, you implement these things to fully automate finance, and yet invoices aren't getting approved. Again, I said that supply chain's complicated, and procurement's not that complicated, and accounts payable should be really simple. But 47% of invoices are taking too long. 45% exceptions. Just these things are just far too hard, and actually, information's all structured. So why can't we use AI to make it much more effective, right? And I got back to this sort of, Jack, to an extent, this sort of talks to your to I think the change in the future of work. The accounts payable role was all about transaction processing, and there clearly will be different numbers of people doing these roles, right? But now it's much more. It's not about transaction processing; it's about advisory. How can I process this invoice faster, or how can I change my rules? Why do I need to touch it? How can I automate it? And then how can I identify all the exceptions and then group them together and manage them in such a way as that they're accurate and complete? Yeah. So I'm just going to give people a little bit of time to digest this table because it's very complicated, right? So I'll just give a couple of minutes to be able to understand it, right? So the sort of 3 steps and stages: invoice ingestion, invoice processing, and kind of analytics, right? So and then there's something there in terms of automation technology, something about use case. And by the way, I'm happy to make these slides available, right? So we'll find the right place, and I've got a PDF version I'll send on, and then people can access. Automation rates, and then customer control. Up front, again, taking a document which can then be structured, machine read, and posted automatically is kind of should be almost trivial now. Almost, OCR is a thing of the past, right? It's a 80s and 90s thing. It's a thing of the past, and should be then. But it's a starting point. They should be fully automated, and then validating the information, making sure you're processing the information and it's going to the right place, using it as a way of correcting and fixing master data, which is the kind of holy grail for transformation. You've then got sort of the sort of flexible matching and spend patterns, and these are areas where just normal rule-based logic is able to get really high levels of matching because you've got the information right up front. Then automated coding, understanding where you've got no PO invoices, and then those are flowing through and going to the right places, consistently being posted to the same general ledger account and cost centers, consistently being able to manage by procurement. You've then got the sort of the final piece where you've then got, actually, so what can I understand? What is the insight I can draw from the patterns, whether it be about the quality of my data or the quality of my process, and how can I start to then make continuous improvements? So I am getting more automation. I am getting the right number of suppliers. And in particular, then I just start getting to the right-hand side, and how can I make some sort of structured recommendations? How can I not only get sort of, if I think of the 4 levels for everything, right? But the 4 levels of information being data and insight, data, information, insight, and interaction, right? So not only, you go from the lowest level of data all the way through to prescriptive analytics, saying not only have I got I've got something that's wrong here, how can I fix it real time, right? And what are some of the interventions I can do, whether they be tactical at the transaction level or more strategic, saying you need to make these changes in your master data or these changes in your policy that will drive you towards high level of automation. And again, because all this information is very structured, this sort of data set lends itself really, really well to automation. So again, I want to just talk a little bit about just sort of double clicking on that and just talk about each kind of AI. So deep learning in Smart PDF, that's the thing that, and deep learning then is looking at the, back to what I said about recognizing your cat or your dog or yourself, it's recognizing using text extraction from the image to be able to bring out all the information to make sure, and it recognizes invoices of different sort of standards and qualities. It's seen enough invoices of all kind to be able to bring that through. And then you therefore got 100% PDF capture, no supplier registration required, very, very high levels of electronic invoicing, and you converted the information from an image into text, then can be matched within your system. And then so machine learning, I talked about that. That's much more kind of structured. So then smart codings is then sort of saying for this particular PO invoice, and I've got an example of this. It really helps to bring it to life. This particular invoice, here's some suggestions in terms of what the right answers might be. And it kind of, machine learning tends to be one of two things, right? Just sort of diverting slightly. It can be attended, which means that someone is, when it has a recommendation, someone says, here's my top 2 or 3 choices, which is the most appropriate. And when someone's, either a person, a human, has made the most appropriate choice, he then remembers that as part of his data set. Or it can be unattended, where having come to a conclusion, that information is processed, right? So the way that this machine learning works is it looks at based on the information it receives, looks at the most likely recommendations, and then asks for a confirmation. And then finally, the sort of I can't say the word statistical, so I'm going to move on. The patterns, the number-based patterns of machine learning in the insights, right? So, understanding what data is in place, looking at historic comparators, identifying what are some of the steps and stages you might take to be able to change the patterns in your business, and kind of how that might move you forward. Right? But I just want to kind of really try and bring this to life with an example. So here's the example of the smart coding in practice. So as I said, the first thing it does, and we're aiming for kind of touchless processing. A machine learning model that very accurately tries to code invoices. And just to excuse me a second, I'll just take a quick drink. To explain the sort of business context for this, for someone who's maybe not yet working this far in their career. The idea is that wherever possible, someone raises a purchase order for what they need to buy. Aside from the sort of expense items like travel and other items which you can maybe put in your personal credit card or your corporate credit card, you raise a purchase order that sort of says, I want to buy this. It's from this company. It costs this much money. I want it against this cost center. And that's how you get the right procurement control and the right level of insight, in particular around, because that gives you a whole lot of information in terms of what I've bought, from whom, and what's some of the stuff that helps you understand it. No PO invoices where someone hasn't done that, either because they're ignoring the policy or because they are legitimately invalid. And that's the problem with that is all the information you would have put on your purchase order that tells you where it's from, where it needs to go, who the approver is, none of that exists on the no PO invoices. So they tend to be one of the areas that really clog up businesses, sending it out to loads of people saying, do you know who raised this? What is this? And that person then is typically disinterested in coding it properly. So these things fly everywhere. Although maybe they are interested, but they don't know the most up-to-date information. What this tool does is uses machine learning to recognize it and consistently post it in the right place in a fully automated fashion. So here's how it works, right? So it looks at the history and of suppliers' invoices or similar invoices to understand. You then get a series of kind of options, and I'll show you those options in a bit more detail, and then the top 5. And then the person who's managing this, whether it be someone in the accounts payable or someone in the business, then is able to say, yeah, I accept that choice, right? So again, it can be used by someone in accounts payable or a business user, you can control that. And then the way that the machine learning works is once it's received enough confirmations of a series of patterns being right, it kind of goes, oh, I know that's not right. So again, confidence levels might go from 40 to 70 to 80, and the machine learning is then trained when the confidence level gets to a certain level, let's say 95%, it recognizes that as something that's in place, and it doesn't need to refer that for a check in the next stage. So in practice then, very exciting invoice screen, right? Here's the transaction. It's been identified as something that's not recognizable. So the bill comes in and it says, actually, you know what? I've looked at this and I think this should be a software expense. It's 75, I'm 70% confident. And if not, actually you can make either choose one of the alternative ones or choose something else, right? Or actually the cost centers, this is what I'm buying and where it should go from a accounting perspective. And this is then where it should go and where in the business. Tax code's really important. I'm not going to talk about it now, unless we're always to spend another hour, but there's a whole bunch of EU-related tax codes change. I mean, essentially the government, the EU wants the government to recognise input and output tax. So tax is something that has penalties associated with it, but also is becoming increasingly important. And then finally, making sure you've got it to the right project. Right. So what this allows you to do through machine learning is increasingly automate that, have an expert confirm it's right, and then it increasingly takes that away. So you can get to, your very, very high levels of automation. So what it does then, it drives efficiency. So actually it drives both efficiency and effectiveness. When I talk about efficiency, I mean doing it quickly. When I talk about effectiveness, I mean doing it properly, right? So it drives efficiency and effectiveness, double checking you've got all this information controlled and posted in the right place. It's also, your business is able to control exactly how it works, and you can confirm that meets all your audit standards. And in particular, and most importantly, I think you increase the data quality, and you're able to make sure that that you're constantly improving the quality of your data as you go, which is the only hope organizations have if they want to drive a sort of large-scale Gen AI transformation program. So why should the kind of CFO care about accounts payable, or why should the CPO care about accounts payable? If you look at the priorities of the CFO particularly, and actually I think these are actually equally applicable to supply chain or finance, right? If you change some of the words, right? They're trying to enable growth in leaner times. They're trying to transform the business and run the business. But typically the best people are required to run the business. So how can you make those people free to be able to help with the transformation? They're trying to actually accelerate transformation and also cultivate talent, right? If you can take your best people from the day-to-day, put them on transformation programs, grow their skills, they'll also become your future leaders, right? And they're also trying to do that, as the CPO, Chief Supply Chain Officer, and CFO are trying to do that in an increasingly complex external environment. We've got stagflation, right? We've got growing prices, unemployment, and somehow also a scarcity of best resources, and supply chain challenges all at the same time, right? So, and that's meaning actually you want to free up and retain your best talent. You need agility and visibility. You need projects to all returning themselves within a year, right? So actually, how do you do that and also drive your Gen AI program? We think actually by using something like accounts payable as a transformation catalyst, you can actually very quick ROI, very quickly pays for itself, and it fixes your master data, and it frees up the profit, the talent, and the cash to be able to transfer, right? So we think that the accounts payable automations are a great way of freeing up talent to profit and cash, and then it can be used for a kind of wider transformation program across the business.